Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. It's really hit home that we are in the VUCA period, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Being able to pivot quickly in our businesses as such is key to reducing losses and capturing new opportunities. My name is Sean, a management consultant with Dun & Bradstreet, handling organizational effectiveness in areas such as business continuity, vendor management, key account management, building and managing remote teams, and other similar productivity-related interventions. Now, when we buy insurance, it's not for the purpose of cashing in on the payout, but it ensures that in the case of an emergency or crisis, the payouts help to mitigate the unforeseen consequences that present itself. However, I'm not here to speak with you about insurance. Similarly, business continuity and disaster recovery plans contribute through forecasting risks and disruptions and ensure that our organizations have the relevant capabilities to weather the storm. Governments, as you can see on my slide, generally adopt these three stages in handling this pandemic that we are in. What you don't see are the intended and unintended consequences occurring at each stage. In stage 1, to control the entry of infected people into the country through early identification. The intended consequence is to turn away or quarantine those who may be potentially carriers of the virus. The next predictable part of this equation would be less tourists, means less people spending on retailers based in the airport. As such, rental rebates and other forms of support were put into place to mitigate the exposure to this loss of revenue. However, this revenue loss is not limited only at the terminals or its retailers and offices. It would hit the travel agents, the taxi drivers, and a whole host of other beneficiaries of the tourism dollar. What would happen to all food meant for in-flight meals? How about the vendors who supply the ingredients and materials for in-flight catering, where financing has been taken out to service their business operational requirements? This is the same matter to consider in stage 2, the intended and unintended consequences of social distancing. We might say that in hindsight, it is 2020. However, that is the purpose of business continuity planning, to analyze, and we know not everything can be analyzed, but at least how we are impacted by our supply chain, the potential challenges and disruptions to our business operations, and to identify strategies to mitigate these risks. We'll revisit the matter of business continuity in the supply chain shortly. In the meantime, let's quickly touch on some of the changes occurring in the region. I hope some of the information shared will be useful to you. In Indonesia, the government introduced a soft lockdown in Jakarta, the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak, resulting in the closure of schools and some businesses. On 24th of April, travel out of the city was strictly banned. According to Jakarta Post a few days ago, the headline read, 70% of textile companies could go out of business because of the COVID-19 virus. This is due to the plunging domestic and export demand. Similarly, according to the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies, COVID-19 is disrupting Indonesia's food system. Employment in agriculture is expected to contract by about 4 to 5%, and domestic agricultural supply by about 6 to 7%. Imports will decrease by 17 to 18%, while import prices are expected to rise by 1 to 3%. With reductions in supplies and imports, food shortages and food price inflation must be expected. Now let's go to Malaysia. I think we all know Malaysia is just eased some of their restrictions. So let's understand a bit about what's happening in Malaysia. A complete national lockdown started on March 18. During this period of lockdown, manpower was heavily reduced for many businesses, such as food production sites, and there were severe logistical issues, such as roadblocks, shorter market hours, and lack of manpower for offloading trucks. Malaysia's Conditional Movement Order, MCO in other words, easing the restrictions to allow businesses to resume their operations, started on Monday, 4th of May. Businesses are adopting a cautious approach, weighing the potential increased revenue against the possibility of becoming the next COVID-19 cluster. Now let's go to the Philippines. In Philippines, as shared by CNN Philippines a few days ago, the government has issued varying degrees of quarantine restrictions. Certain high-risk areas will be under enhanced community quarantine, ECQ, until the 15th of May, which means strict stay-at-home rules, mass transportation suspended, non-essential businesses remain closed. For low to moderate risk areas, general community quarantine, GCQ guidelines, which are more relaxed, will apply. More businesses and sectors are also allowed to reopen with limited operations and capacity, such as malls and shopping centers. Public transportation will be allowed in the GCQ areas. Similarly, land, air, and sea public transportation are allowed to reopen at reduced capacity. Some of the challenges for businesses are restricted movement of goods and people, as you can see on my slide. Now let's go to Thailand. In Thailand, according to Channel News Asia, the country is preparing to relax some of its COVID-19 control measures from the 3rd of May. These activities and businesses will benefit from the partial relaxation. Markets, eateries outside department stores, retailers, sports and recreational activities, hair salons and barbershops, as well as pet grooming and boarding businesses. The government has also announced that even with the nationwide lockdown, food shortages were not to be expected. Lastly, let's understand a little bit about what's happening in Vietnam. In Vietnam, with the easing of the restrictions last week, tourism activities and public transportation have resumed. Social distancing restrictions remain. Sports centers and indoor sports businesses are no longer on the list of suspended businesses. Honda Vietnam has announced that it would resume vehicle production. Vietnam had initially stopped all rice exports. However, as of last week, the Ministry of Industry and Trade has indicated that the country has resumed normal rice export since May 1st. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for all this information that is going around in the news, okay, now that we have some updates of what's going on in the region, I think it's very important for those managing supply chains that we are very aware that the laws, the policies, and the crisis itself are highly volatile, and finding a way forward is very ambiguous. We can see how severe the impact of the virus has been on a global scale. Now, when we speak about disruptions in the supply chain, we look at demand and supply shocks. These shocks occur due to a variety of factors, such as the movement curbs. Employees cannot go to work. Truckers are unable to transport goods. Airlines have grounded most of their fleet, and the capacity for suppliers to export their stock via air freight has dwindled. Another contributing factor was what is considered essential or non-essential businesses. An example would be packaging materials such as plastic bottles and tin cans are not deemed essential in Malaysia. Hence, materials for packing ended up in short supply. Now, the first shock wave started with a production shutdown in China, followed by the collapse of the domestic demand. For leaders managing these supply chains, this possesses a very big problem. However, we would have alternative backups in various other manufacturing nations. If we cannot produce in China, we will go to Vietnam or we will go to India. However, as the virus spread, the same shocks hit other Asian nations, and the combination of large-scale and widespread demand and supply shocks happening simultaneously sets the COVID-19 crisis apart from all other crises. Classic planning models are not built to accommodate such severe peaks in demand. Now, when considering the supply chain, there is a phenomenon called the bullwhip effect, where a small increase in demand at the consumer level may lead to a large increase at the manufacturer's production. You can refer to the image on your screen. Now, if these demand changes were occurring consistently, according to different seasons perhaps, the impact along the supply chain remains predictable and controllable to a certain extent. However, in this pandemic, we have observed various shocks occurring, such as demand spikes due to panic buying, closing of borders, limited manpower mobility, tighter export regulation, reduced air travel affecting air cargo shipments, customs delays, among various other factors. This puts our planning models into disarray. What we can expect to see as the situation starts to stabilize and begin to recover are multiple small shocks along the supply chain. For example, the simultaneous relaunch, as we are seeing the different regions starting to ease their restrictions to allow their economies to improve, the simultaneous relaunch of various production sites in a region will lead to a spike in demand for raw materials, causing another bullwhip effect. Thus, it may take an extended period of time for supply chains to recover, depending on the future spread and severity of the COVID-19 virus. Now, due to various factors occurring, there are certain purchasing activities that organizations are doing to try to protect themselves and to ensure sustainability to their supply chains. These activities may lead to the bullwhip effect, such as batch ordering by buyers, forecasting errors due to limited visibility of the end user demand, price fluctuations from vendors which incentivize buyers to build up stocks when prices are low, and shortage gaming when buyers inflate orders to anticipate a shortage in the market, which is what is happening now. Some of the mitigation strategies to reduce these demand spikes include lead time reduction, price guarantees so that we can keep prices low, and capacity reservation for verified buyers. On top of these mitigation strategies, there are some other lessons that we can learn from past disruptions, such as getting transparency of the entire supply chain and identifying the shocks that would occur, establishing protocols for ad hoc, or in other words, temporary measures in case of demand spikes, and establishing a comprehensive supply chain recovery plan addressing the different types of risks. We begin by developing and assessing multiple demand scenarios for the next 6 to 18 months and evaluating the production capacity and ramp-up period given the prevailing uncertainty. We need to be ready to qualify new suppliers, consider spot buys, and secure strategic supply control, knowing that suppliers will be faced with various shocks leading to supply shortages for an extended period of time. Once the lockdown is over, those with a well-prepared recovery plan will be back to normal more quickly than those who don't. Ladies and gentlemen, crisis in Chinese is Wei Qi. Wei stands for danger and Qi stands for opportunity. In every crisis lies the seed for opportunity. In this crisis economy, and I particularly like this word crisis economy because there are opportunities that surface. Companies such as LVMH and L'Oreal have repurposed their production facilities to produce hand sanitizers. Singapore gaming company Razer has started their own mask manufacturing production line. Prada has started producing overalls. Zara has shifted their operations to produce medical supplies, and so many other businesses have pivoted quickly to identify and capture opportunities in this crisis economy. The benefit of doing so is far-ranging. The business provides a valuable resource in saving lives, retain and redevelop and redeploy their workforce, and keep their facilities operating despite difficult economic conditions. To conclude, there are many opportunities that we can seize during periods of crisis, such as doing a cash flow and profit impact audit to identify opportunities to reduce our cash flow needs. We can identify root causes of risk and vulnerabilities, where these risks are lying, and how much are we exposed to these risks. It helps us to increase our control mechanisms with different stakeholders, our vendors, our employees. It helps us to redeploy our manpower to achieve greater productivity and to reinvent ourselves and offerings to remain relevant in this crisis economy. It helps us in helping to revise our current business continuity plans. Ladies and gentlemen, for most of us, we will have an enterprise risk management plan. Not all, I dare say, very few of us would have considered a pandemic risk in our ERM plans, in our enterprise risk management plans. After all, whoever envisioned that the manufacturing nations would all go into lockdown at the same time? But it has happened. As such, in times like this, it also helps us to improve and to revise and improve our business continuity plans to incorporate such pandemic risks. With that, thank you for your time. I hope you have found this session meaningful, and if you've got any questions, please feel free to let us know. I'll hand it over to Tiffany now. Tiffany?
Okay, sure. Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much for the sharing. I hope many of the participants have benefited greatly. So, okay, next up, right, we're going to have Mr. Ng Chi Keong, Associate Director, Corporate Innovation of CIMB Bank. He'll be talking more about how SMEs can leverage on the e-supply chain financing support provided during this period. So, Chi Keong, over to you, please.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you. I'm Chi Keong from CIMB Corporate Banking Department, and I'm here today to introduce to you all our e-supply chain financing program, or E-SCF for short. Now, before I launch into description of this program and how it benefits the SME players here, give me a couple of minutes to run through what's an overview of the existing supply chain financing program that is available outside right now. Right. So in a typical supply chain, there's always two parties, the buyer and the supplier. buyer will place PO to the supplier, and then supplier deliver goods, issue invoice to the buyer. Third, buyer will pay for the goods delivered to the supplier subsequently. So it's a straightforward, simple arrangement, except that usually there's competing interest between these two parties. Supplier wants to be paid as early as possible, whereas the buyer wants to pay as late as possible. Hence, supply chain financing arises to resolve the issues and assist in the working capital financing arrangement for both the supplier and buyers. Broadly speaking, there's two forms of supply chain financing, the buyer-driven and the supplier-driven. So in the buyer-driven type of supply chain financing, the bank will provide financing to the buyer, usually based on the purchase orders. Same thing in the flow, buyer place the purchase order to the supplier, and then buyer will submit this PO to the bank. When the bank receives these purchase orders already, they will pay supplier on behalf of the buyer. And lastly, buyer will then pay banks on the subsequent agreed date. Usually this form of financing, buyer-driven type of financing, comes in the form of payables finance, purchase order financing, or some trade other finance product called letter of credit, trust receipt. Different terminology, but it shares the same underlying type of financing structure. The second type of supplier-driven type of financing will be bank provide financing to the supplier based on the invoices. So in this case, when buyer pays PO to the supplier, supplier will deliver goods and issue invoices to the buyer. Now with these invoices, supplier will then submit the invoices to the bank. Bank will then pay the supplier, and then followed by subsequent payment from the buyer to the bank directly. So for this form of financing, usually it's called factoring, invoice financing, accounts receivable purchase, or accounts receivable financing. Same thing, a lot of different terms, different terminology, but underlying financing structure remains the same. So with these two forms of supply chain financing, banks usually have already given, offer this type of financing to the markets. But local SMEs do not really have readily access to this type of financing products, or they do not wish to provide this type, apply for this type of products, mainly due to 5 reasons. First would be the lack of financial statements or updated financials. Banks and lenders, we love to look at finance. Sorry, give me a second. Yeah, we like to look at financial statements, audited financials, updated financials accounts. I'm sure a lot of you have been requested for this type of information from the banks before, in order to assess your credit worthiness and to grant you a suitable credit limit. So even after the banks receive this type of information, they will also request for personal guarantee and collateral requirement in the form of cash deposits, a charge on your properties, a pledge on your current assets. Third, there's also a lot of paperwork involved in this type of supply chain finance. Why? Because if you look at, recall back just now what I told you all, the financing depends heavily on invoices and purchase orders. And SME owners have to spend a lot of time to prepare, collate, and compile this documentation in order to submit to the bank for financing. So even after the bank receives these documentations, we also have to spend time to verify and validate these documents. Hence, there will be processing fees involved in this type of typical supply chain products. And adding on to this processing fee, there will also be interest costs, because tying back to the first 2 points, in the lack of financial statements or updated financials or insufficient collaterals, the banks will also impose higher credit or higher interest costs to this product in order to compensate for the credit risk. So in CIMB, we recognize these 5 major issues, and we have decided to come up with this e-supply chain financing program to help and benefit SMEs. So how it works is we have tied up with several e-invoice processing agents, each with their own ecosystems of suppliers and buyers. So once all these suppliers and buyers are in their ecosystems, the buyer can place the PO directly on the EP portal, and supplier can subsequently secure this PO from the e-portal. With the PO secured, supplier can deliver the goods to the buyer, is automatically acknowledged by the buyer after they have received the goods directly. So the systems will automatically generate an e-invoice and then submit to CIMB. And once we receive these e-invoices, we can pay the supplier within T+1 days, and then buyer can pay us a subsequent invoice due date. So in this e-supply chain financing program, unlike traditional supply chain financing, we fund supplier based on approved e-invoices, which are automatically generated and accepted by the buyer on the e-portal. So what's the benefit of this e-SCF program? First two benefits, which is the most important, I think, would be there is no financial statement requirement and collateral requirement for this program. The reason why we don't need this financials and collateral is because we rely heavily on the data received from the e-invoice processing agents to analyze your transaction history between the supplier and the buyer. And as long as the transaction is satisfactory, meaning minimal credit notes, return goods, debit note raised, we are able to analyze these flows and determine an appropriate credit limit for your supply chain financing. And because we are working very heavily with the e-invoice processing agent, the rates are very competitive, and we don't need you all to produce any paper or automated. It's fully paperless and automated, where you don't have to submit any physical invoices, and none of the supporting documents are required for funding requests. Once you are on board the program, all the e-invoices are submitted to us directly with minimal inputs from you. Hence, in order to enjoy this program, it's a very simple sign-up process where there is a one-off simple agreement for you to sign and a KYC check for us to conduct before we set up the account for you. So since this program, we have launched it in early this year, the response has been pretty favorable. We have already a couple of sign-ups and response from suppliers. So we have also compiled a few questions from the suppliers. First, broadly, would be what type of transactions that would be qualified for this type of financing. So because we rely again on the transaction history and the data between supplier and buyers, the trades and transactions must be on open accounts and occur on a recurring basis. This will enable us to look at your sales trend, your seasonality factors, and compute a suitable credit limit for you. Hence, one-off type of sales or purchases would not qualify. So the second thing that is most important would be, would my relationship with the buyer be affected? Rest assured that your relationship with buyer is also important to us. That's why CIMB will first work with you and the e-invoicing processing partner to resolve any potential issue that we see without minimal contact with the buyer. We hope that your transaction volume with the buyer will grow as well. So we will try to minimize and disturb your buyer and affect your relationship. Third, will there be any changes to my existing process? So if you're already on board on the e-processing agents ecosystem, there is minimal change to our existing billing and collection process. You only need to open a new CIMB account and request the buyer to change payment to this account. So usually after I describe to the suppliers how the program works and answer their questions already, the next question is how do I sign up for this program? So this is my contact number and my email. Feel free to drop me an email if you are interested to sign up or you have any further inquiry. So this is the questions, the QR code that I can scan as well if you are interested to get the slide from us as well. Another questions that I just will add on, another question that is really frequently raised by the supplier will be, how do they know which are the buyers that we have actually onboarded for this program already? So for right now, we can extend this program to suppliers of buyers such as NTUC, SIA, Singtel, SETS, or Singapore Refining, Singapore petroleum refining company. So as we are still expanding this list of the buyers, but so far, these are the approved buyer lists that we can onboard. Thanks. So back to Tiffany now.
Okay, Ken share. Thank you, Chi Kyung. Thank you for the presentation. I hope majority of participants will understand that there's an alternative way to finance, the products that they are looking into to purchase. So now we have already, come to the Q&A session, but just do let me make some admin announcement, especially for those who would like to receive the presentation deck. Please take some time to scan the QR code on the screen right now to fill up a short survey. Do take note that there are two different sets of QR code. One is for D&B presentation deck and the other is for CIMB presentation deck. So after you have completed the form, the presentation deck will be sent it to you in a few days time later after editing is done. I also do understand some of the participants saying that, hey, I'm looking at the screen through my mobile phone. I can't really scan the QR code. Rest assured that after the event, Singapore Chinese Chamber will actually be sending you guys the QR code and the link for you all to do the scanning and clicking of the link to fill up the form to receive the presentation deck too. So no, without further ado, now let us welcome back our two speakers for the Q&A sessions. If you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to submit them by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type in your questions. Do note that we have limited number of time for the Q&A session, so we may not be able to answer all of your questions. But if you have certain questions that you still want to direct it, to us, D&B or CIMB, you can actually contact them directly with their contact details featured on the screen, or you can actually email SCCCI and we'll also forward the inquiries to them. But for those who, leave the Q&A questions, as anonymous, okay, we will be able to have your records of your email and we'll have CIMB or, D&B to email you guys on the questions if we are unable to answer it live in this area here. So without further ado, maybe we can welcome the speakers, Chi Kyung and Sean back, to online, so that we can proceed on with the Q&A session. So Sean and Chi Kyung, maybe I need you to unmute your mic and your video offline. Yep. Thank you. So, while we wait for more participants to, post some of their certain questions online on the Q&A button, okay, I maybe have one question that I'd like to post it to Sean, after going through the supply chain and what kind of effects it will be, and like what you say, like a 危机就是商机 in Chinese. When there is danger, there's always be opportunity. So maybe you can share with some of the, participants here, what are some of the new opportunities does this COVID-19 spell for companies in reinventing their value chain? Especially understand that many companies, they have limited resources or manpower, they are not able to, quickly change as, quick or as fast as those other companies or MNCs are. So maybe Sean, can you share with us a bit on, the what to do so that companies can learn a trick or two and be able to bounce back straight away after once the COVID-19 start to subside down?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Tiffany. It's a very difficult question to answer because we have no end in sight. We have no end in sight. We see the restrictions starting to ease. However, the forecast is if the community themselves don't adopt social distancing measures on their own with a level of initiative, we might end up having a second wave. So we hear all the news being perpetrated around. So maybe a bit of insight into how we can reinvent our value chains and new opportunities that we have. I've just jotted down a few points as you had asked me the question. So we've discovered that even the largest of businesses are not immune to this crisis. It is a time where all of us are forced to face our current weaknesses and vulnerabilities. As I mentioned at the end, just as I was coming to my end of the presentation, pandemic risk is not something that most of us would ever consider to be an occurrence. Where in the world or how in the world would we ever imagine multiple economies coming to a standstill or going into multiple regions going into a lockdown? That means our manufacturing supply chain, all of a sudden, the backup that we had is no longer of use. So these vulnerabilities that we observe should motivate us to be able to adjust our business models to this new reality that we are going to face, or that we are currently in right now. We need to be able to leverage on incorporating technological innovation, such as software, data, cloud computing, robots, and artificial intelligence. It is also this is also a good time to consider developing our people's capabilities in the area to be agile and to be able to pivot quickly to new opportunities that surface in a crisis economy. By doing that, the evolution of our supply chain towards digitization can be empowered, as well as helping the business itself to improve supply chain visibility, avoid or reduce disruptions, or reduce the impact of disruptions, and to respond more rapidly to the spikes and shocks, as well as to build more resilient supply chains. Tiffany, this is my 2 cents worth. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I have done you justice in my response.
Okay, I believe each and every company, most important is also to look into the resources that they have and how to innovate, especially during this period. You know, what kind of resources that I can change and, you know, to adapt with, and using the necessary technology tools to help me with the current situation. Like a lot of the companies who are in the F&B, you know, within the night, a lot of them went online, you know, using Facebook and Instagram and every tools to help them. So I believe it's very important for SMEs to really sit down and think, what are the things that they can go to? So, you know, thanks, Sean. Thanks so much for answering the question. Next, I do have quite a number of questions that is directed to Chee Kiong there with regards to the ESCF program. So I do have, you know, the most important question that many of them have is that, what is the interest rate charge for the ESCF program? And maybe also to answer, like, is there any charges moving forward, you know, hidden charges that maybe SMEs need to take note of that they are unaware? So maybe Chee Kiong, I will need you to answer on the, you know, financing portion for the supply chain.
Sure. Hey, thanks, Tiffany. When we launched this program early this year, the market interest rate that we charge for this ESCF program ranges from between 3.8 to about 4% per annum. Now, we understand the COVID situation right now and is impacting the businesses, their cash flows. So we have introduced a promotional 6 months period offering at 3.2 to 3.5% for this ESCF loan if you sign up with us right now. So secondly, I think some of you also asked whether what are the e-invoicing platform that are currently in this program. So we have several. Right now, 2 of them is Sesame and PrepBiz. So if you are already a part of the community in the ecosystem of Sesame and PrepBiz, you can join this program very easily. And if I may, I also saw this question from somebody, one of the participants, regarding what's the benefit of this ESCF program compared to the ESG program that is being promoted by Enterprise Singapore right now. Well, one thing to note that this program, if you recall, we don't need financials and we don't require collateral requirements, unlike the Enterprise Singapore program where you need to provide the banks of all this information in order for them to process the application. Second thing is, the recourse of this, in our supply chain program, if the buyer don't pay up, we don't go back to you. So rest assured, when you sell out the invoices to us, as long as it's valid invoices, we will provide the funding to you with no recourse back, even if the buyer goes under. But whereas the Enterprise Singapore program, you have to pay the banks, and if you don't pay up, the banks will go after you. So that's the 2 main difference between our program and the Enterprise Singapore program. So if you are interested, please do give me a call and sign up. So another thing is, one of the question was asking about buyers. So maybe I spoke too fast just now. I just repeat again. Our approved buyer that is inside the program right now is NTUC, SIA, SATS, Singapore Refining, company, and also Singtel. So if you are a supplier for these 5 buyers, please do give me a call, and I can connect with you and see how we can push this product to you efficiently and effectively for you to gain these benefits. Yeah. So I think back to you now, Tiffany. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Chi Kyung. Okay, I hope you guys have a better understanding of the SCF program. Do let us know if you have any other questions. Okay, sorry, one more. Back to Chi Kyung. Chi Kyung, sorry.
Yes, Tiffany.
Yeah, I do have another, participants also asking about what is Watson's. How about Watson's? Is it one of the buyers itself? I think another thing that I think a lot of participants will also want to know. Okay, so how do you qualify them? To be a supplier. How do I know if my company is being able to qualify into this SCF program? What are the things that I need to have? Or as long as I just have a CIMB bank account is good enough. And I think another thing a lot of companies also ask, if I have companies that is, my suppliers are based in overseas countries, and maybe I do not have a CIMB bank account at the current moment, will I still be able to supply in? So maybe you can go about to answer like what are some of the qualification, as in the qualifying, pointers that the companies need to have.
Yeah. So for currently right now, because this program is newly launched just this year only, as long as you are a supplier of the 5 buyers that I mentioned just now, you are applicable and you can join this program from us. So Watson, we have to check whether Watson is a supplier of any of the buyers. So that's the first criteria. And the second criteria, of course, would be you have to join join the ecosystem of the e-processing agent. So because this will cut down all the processing, the paperwork process that is typically associated with the existing financing programs right now. So also on the last questions, whether is it for overseas, right now it's focusing on purely domestic suppliers and buyers. But once we scale up, of course, we look at more further opportunities to look at financing the buyer and also overseas suppliers as well. I hope I answered the question, Tiffany.
Yeah, but I hope that answers quite a lot of participants, because after I asked down, quite a number of them is asking what about, buyers from Japan MNCs, and, is it only catered for the local businesses and local transactions? So I think moving forward, CIMB will slowly build up the pipeline, to cater for overseas companies. And then, you guys will do the necessary promotion and publicity for the rest of the, suppliers to know more about it in the future. Okay, so I hope that answers quite a number of questions with regards to the overseas buyers and suppliers situation. Okay, so I do have another question by another participant that has given. Okay, that's mainly more for Sean. So Sean, probably I need you to be back online down here. So the question is that, given with the current COVID-19 development, how different should firms, approach supply chain management or even business continuity for that matter? I think a lot of them will want to know, like, hey, moving forward, how is business will be as usual, but things will change. Like even the consumers' buying behavior will change. And like what you say, there's going to be a whipping effect. Things will change. So as a company, should I buy maybe more supply to, be ready for this after post-COVID-19? Or how should I go about it? So maybe Sean, you can touch a bit more on that, on, how should different companies approach their supply chain management, especially after this COVID-19 period?
Sure. It is not the first time that we have gone through a crisis. We've gone through many economic shocks in the past. We've gone through many supply chain shocks in the past. And throughout these different experiences, we should be able to revise our business continuity plans and our supply chain vetting process in order to ensure a reasonable continuity of operations. Okay. Secondly, knowing where our supply chain starts, knowing where they are located, knowing what disruptions risks are most likely to occur, and how the local government or the federal government of the countries that we are in, how they react and respond, and being ready to activate alternative suppliers at a moment's notice becomes very important. I was reading an article quite recently. I was having a chat with a few business owners as well. And a lot of businesses in the B2B who are using the B2B model, in a matter of days, have had to reinvent themselves to be able to go into e-commerce B2C model. In this case, where we are looking at supply chain and business continuity, we should aim for greater visibility in our supply chain by identifying the shocks, in our the shocks along the chain. Okay? It is also a time for us to identify business continuity planning measures that we can factor in to reduce or remove these shocks, okay? And adopt strategic vendor, not just tactical. Most of us are very tactical in nature because we move very quickly to make decisions. This is an opportunity that allows us to put in strategic vendor management measures, okay, that will allow us to reduce exposure to these various risks or shocks in our supply chain. So this is how we should approach supply chain and BC differently, taking into consideration a pandemic risk, which is unheard of. It's something that we would not envision to see multiple regions, multiple manufacturing regions come to a lockdown. I think this is a very important and very critical point that we need to remember when we redesign or improve our risk management plans, our enterprise risk management plans for our supply chain. I think these are good opportunities for us to help us evolve.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Sean. Thanks for the the valuable information on down there, that what should companies take note of moving forward after this pandemic situation, and how to put the proper risk management in, and how to look out in terms of their supply chain value, because I don't think this will be the first and will be the last situation that the whole world will be facing in future. It may be anything from trade wars to other pandemics coming in also. So if you have any more questions for participants, okay, I do have one more question for Sean. Someone is asking also in generally, okay, some of us face severe impact on collection payments from business to business. Curious if this will cause a different impact to D&B credit assessment of business down the road in future. I think what it means by, with this, pandemic, a lot of companies also face like, their P&L will be 180 degrees being turned over within a night, so just to curious, like, for D&B, in terms of the credit assessments of business down the road, is there any impact or differences? Yeah.
I think at this stage, so far, there are not going to be any changes at this stage. However, I think it's better for this question to be communicated offline so that we are able to share with you any new developments that may arise over time with D&B's credit assessment processes.
Okay, I understand that the question is being answered anonymously. So whoever have posted the question, maybe you can just drop, Sean an email, or you can just email Singapore Chinese Chamber. We'll forward the question directly to them. As mentioned, probably each company, each scenario is a bit different. So the company D&B definitely have to assess individually in order to give you the correct answer for it. So we've come near to the end of the whole event. Okay, so as spoken, for those participants who would like to get the presentation deck, please scan the QR code. Otherwise, Singapore Chinese Chamber will also be sending you the email with on how you can get the presentation deck. So without further ado, okay, I'd like to thank Sean and Chee Kiong, for today's presentation. Sorry, Chee Kiong. Yes. So Yes, I'd like to thank the both speakers for today's presentation, and I hope all the participants have enjoyed and had a fruitful presentation today. And rest assured, if you need to refer back to the webinar session, we'll be posting this webinar up on our SCCCI Facebook page, which you can follow with us on the SME ICC Facebook page itself. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.